Hello again and welcome to Southern Circuit. I'm Rickley Stone. He may have taken the name from a famous New York restaurant, but the business he's built up around it here is distinctly Tallahassee. Tonight on Southern Circuit, the man and the story behind Tallahassee's successful Lindy's fried chicken chain. It's been said that boys never grow up. They just change their toys. That's what we found in Quincy when we visited with some boys and their flying machines. Winter is a quiet time on Florida's barrier islands, a good time for a look at the history behind Little St. George. Tallahassee's historic Murphy House dates back to 1838, but in 1983, the Park Avenue House is making a new history for itself as home of a variety of local businesses, as we'll see when we journey this week on Southern Circuit. Stay with us. Kentucky Fried Chicken has the Colonel. Tallahassee's Lindy's Fried Chicken has the Commodore. And according to owner Ray Salas, that's one step above.
I've always been in the restaurant business, and I was about to get out of it when I went to work for a local chicken chain in this area. And I was there 2 weeks, and I says, baby, this is it. No waitresses, no dishwashers, because as a manager, I was always the dishwasher because they wouldn't show up, or the waitress, and these people had to be served, and they weren't, they didn't care about my trouble. They came in to eat, so I started thinking chicken and opened up my first place on Thomasville Road, and that was back 16 years ago. I think it was 1968.
Success has been sweet to the Commodore since the opening of his Thomasville Road store. Today, there are 5 Lindy's in Tallahassee, doing business to the tune of $2 million a year.
Hard work is the answer. Dedication. And try and be a servant to the people as to what they want. They're your bread and butter. You satisfy a customer. And you just have to, if you're in anything long enough, you get a feel for it. You can just feel things. And this has been one of my secrets, to be able to feel people and to get the vibrations and to get where they're coming from. It's, I guess, a gift or something that you have to be blessed with, you know.
But blessed as he may be, success did not come easy for the Commodore.
I used to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and I says, well, I think it's not for me. I know I have a good product here, and I guess maybe it's just I'm not that fortunate for this thing to take off, you know. So, Lord and behold, the place burnt down one day. That was when I was on Thomasville Road. And I was doing about $2,000 a week with the business. And it was closed for the longest time. And I said, man, I'll be glad if I can just continue and get this same business when I open up again. So when I opened up, I put a sign out that Lindy's was now open. I got my $2,000. Following week was $2,500. $3,000, $3,500. So what happened while I was closed, people would probably talk to each other, and one person would probably say, I'll be glad when Lindy's opens, you know, and with this they'd say, well, what's with Lindy's? And I think it was word of mouth from that time that I was closed that these people, that's the best advertisement, is word of mouth, and these people came to patronize me, you know, and that was it. The fire was the one that did it. Matter of fact, these business people that I'd come in, they said, how's business, Ray? And I said, terrific, terrific. You want a big increase? Burn the place down, you know. And I was just joking, you know. But, and then with this, I mean, rather than to sit on the money and take it to the bank, I said, well, let's go, baby. Let's another place, and we just kept leasing places, and as we went into our third place, and then we started buying properties and buildings. So at this time we own the property on South Monroe, North Monroe, and Killearn. Those are our properties, you know.
While word-of-mouth advertising got Lindy's on its feet, it was the Lindy's hustle that got the Commodore his reputation for fancy footwork.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, rock, back, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
I've been all over the world, and I've seen all kinds of girls. But baby, let me tell you, you're the one.
These are the variations. Back in the 40s, they used to call the Lindy hop, and it's the same thing as the swing step that they're using today. And everybody says they think I made it up, and I really haven't. The old Lindy, that's an old dance that they used back in the 40s, you know. So I just call it the Lindy hustle, you know.
These days, the Commodore is spending more time on the dance floor than behind the counter. Yet he still remains involved in the day-to-day operations of the stores. And when he's not hustling for Lindy's or doing the Lindy's hustle, the Commodore can be found volunteering his time and energies to the people and organizations that help make Lindy's the success it is today.
There's a warm feeling in this town. I've always had it. I've been accepted. And the greatest thrill for me is several times that I've been out shopping and a person would come up to me, one of my customers, and says, "Mr. Salas, you're an asset to the community." And that makes the person feel good, you know. The way I feel that I started with nothing. Tomorrow, if I don't have anything, at least I did something when I could. So it isn't going to hurt my health any, it isn't going to affect me any. It'll just be a passing thing that is part of my life.
It won't be long before the Commodore relinquishes command of his chicken empire, turning the business over to Ray Salas Jr. But you can bet he won't just mellow into an easy, do-nothing retirement. Already he has plans for new business ventures. And then again, who knows? Tallahassee's Commodore may just keep on dancing.
They say if you take up a hobby, it's a good way to deal with the stress of day-to-day living. These people have taken up a hobby. They've taken to the skies on the weekends. They're weekend pilots, but they're not the kind of pilot you're thinking about.
These pilots don't ever leave the ground, and yet they're every bit as serious about their flying as any airborne pilot. They're members of the Seminole Radio Control Club, and their idea of fun is to drive out to Quincy on a Sunday afternoon and fly the airplanes they've so painstakingly designed and built. Sounds simple enough, right?
Now, what do you want?
Just grab it. Now give a little left in it.
A little left?
A little left.
A little left.
A little down. A little right.
Hello?
Better
Hello?
let me have one. Okay, good.
This is a lot like a video game, and I was never any good at those either.
See those birds way out there?
Yeah, they're running.
Out there?
Some guys fly airplanes with motors in them, and we don't. Okay, well now, the things with the motor in them, you know, other things being equal, they're going to fly. You mean the power will pull them off. But with a sailplane, you've got to know how to fly. You've got to understand what's going on in the air, or, you know, to keep the thing going. That's the challenge of it. No two flights are the same.
Okay, anytime you are.
Oh, Lord.
You can get in an airplane for $40, buy your radio for $120, so you could be in the air for way less than $200, which is considerably less than a set of golf clubs.
What do you enjoy the most about it?
In my case, I like to get outside, and it's a way to get out in the sun and do something outside. And also, I'm a like to refer to myself as a craftsman. I'm a builder, and I like to see the things that I do perform like they're supposed to. And that's a real challenge.
Typical airplane, as far as building is concerned, depending on the complexity of the airplane, takes 20 to 60 hours, but it's the sort of thing you can do 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and an hour here, so that spread over a couple of months, you know, you haven't put that much time daily into it. Flying, we usually fly once or twice a week, and typically we're gone maybe 3-4 hours. It takes less time, I would say, than most people spend on golf and fishing and so forth, the people that are into that.
Is this a family affair?
Not really. There are some wives that enjoy it. My wife doesn't happen to enjoy it. It's no problem because she does her gardening and I do the airplanes. But there are, and a lot of kids get involved in it.
As far as we could tell, there were more young at heart than youngsters actually doing the flying that day. But then again, building and flying these airplanes is not really kids' stuff.
I've been flying radio control since 1970. I've been flying sailplanes competitively for about 4 or 5 years now. Had a real good season a couple years ago, and since then the airplanes have changed dramatically, and I'm just now learning the new airplanes.
How so?
Well, they went from a relatively slow 2-channel airplane to a really, really fast 4 or 5-channel airplane. When I say channel, I mean function. And the faster airplanes are a little bit harder to fly, and it takes a little bit longer to learn how to fly them competitively. I mean, I can fly no problem, but to fly competitively takes a little bit of time and a lot of practice, mainly.
Okay, this is the winch, which is the launching mechanism. It's a starter motor with a drum and a foot switch to control the switch. And then the winch line comes off of here, parachute over here, which hitches to the airplane.
Have someone drag the,
this is the
make sure it doesn't...
turnaround, which is about to go 1,000 feet down that way. Okay, Michael. Keep it up that way, Shorty.
What? Sure is crosswind right now.
It's a totally different kind of activity. It can be a relaxing activity. You don't have to stay on top of the airplane all the time. You don't have mess to clean up afterwards. The thing that you're looking for, rather than precision of repeating maneuvers after maneuver, the idea is to look for lift. You have to develop a sense. You have to know where to look for the lift. It's something that takes a long time to develop and to do well.
Looking good. Let it drift.
Have you ever crashed one?
Oh, yes. Everybody has. Almost everybody, I think. The point is that the only way you really crash is by doing something stupid. So you can only have yourself to blame. I mean, my last crash, I was coming in, sort of bringing it in, and it was going a little faster than I had more speed built up than I had intended, and decided to let it go, and I'd forgotten I'd parked my car there. And the window was open, and the fuselage went into the window, but the wing didn't make it.
Once a seasonal stopping place for Florida's original inhabitants, and later the site of the first lighthouse to serve Apalachicola shipping. Little St. George Island is today a rare place among barrier islands, a place where one can still catch a glimpse of original Florida preserved. Very little has changed here since the Wheaton Indian culture visited seasonal oyster camps on the island more than 1,500 years ago.
It was all part of St. George Island until the mid-50s when Bob Sykes' Cut was made at the eastern end of what is now Little St. George. And the cut was put through to help the fishermen. It gave them a much more rapid access to the Gulf.
Because of its location adjacent to the favored harbor entrance to Apalachicola Bay, Congress in 1831 authorized the construction of a lighthouse on the island.
This, I believe, is the third lighthouse that was built here. There was one built in the 1840s, undermined, rebuilt, destroyed by a storm, and then they had to rebuild it again, and instead of rebuilding it to the height of 65 feet, which the height was before the storm, they rebuilt it much stronger to a height of 75 feet. This is a stone that was put up on the island in the 1840s, and it's to commemorate a sailor died offshore. There are two stories that go with this. One of them is that he died on a boat, and his friends just buried him here, and the family sent the money down to have this stone erected. Another story, which is a little more believable, is that he did, in fact, die offshore on a boat, and when the boat came into Apalachicola, the folks in town said, "We do not want this man buried here. He had a very contagious disease. Please bury him out on Sand Island." And consequently, he was buried here. And the family sent down the money for the stone, and the stone reads, "Sacred to the memory of Lewis Leland, who died August 21st, 1841, age 37 years, 4 months, and 5 days. He died with a humble trust and fine faith in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the sinner's friend. Amen." Quite a tribute to any kind of a person.
Though presently an uninhabited natural preserve, carefully maintained by Ranger Dumas and the Florida Department of Natural Resources, the island still contains remnants of more active times.
In the 30s and in 50s, turpentining carried on Little St. George by two different leaseholders. And at that time, there were up to 70 black families living here as workers who daily or weekly made a trip almost to every pine tree on the Cape to collect the rosin and put it in the barrels. And the Porter's family, he was lighthouse keeper here, 1800s on up to, I believe, the late 30s or 40s when the lighthouse went automatic.
It was the Porters who built the most remote structure on the island, known as the Storm House.
This was constructed to give the Porter family a place to go when the storms came rushing in from the Gulf of Mexico. Mrs. Porter tells a story of one time she and her sisters and the mother had been sent over to the storm house by the Mr. Porter, the father, and they stayed there through the storm, and things started to clear up, so they left the storm house and started back for the lighthouse and met Mr. Porter on the way, and he was hopping mad because they were right in the eye of the storm. And they went back to the storm house and rode out the rest of it. You'll notice right here, this is a cat face. This is evidence of the turpentine industry that was here in the 30s and again in the 50s. That's what these roads are. They were cut for the purpose of getting to these various pine trees. Herbert Marshall, who was at one time sheriff of Franklin County, married Mr. Porter's daughter, Pearl. And previous to that time, Mr. Porter had split the island, which he purchased for approximately $500 early on. He split the property among his children. And it was our Mrs. Marshall and her husband who got the property back together and then bought it from the members of the family. And the Marshalls moved out here. Mr. Marshall brought over 2 army barracks and built his home, which was a weekend vacation place. It is one of the finest places to work because I feel I'm making a contribution not only to the Park Service and the Bureau of Environmental Land Management, but to the people of the state of Florida. By maintaining this as a barrier island, I will be protecting the mainland. And I live on the mainland, so I'm deeply interested in protecting the mainland. But many people like to come out here and shell. It's especially good in the spring after a very heavy storm from the south, because it churns up the shells from the offshore areas and brings them up onto the beaches. And I have seen it when it was literally a foot thick with new shells that had just been washed ashore. And you go back a month later and those shells are all gone. They've been covered by the sand that's been brought in. So it's an ever-changing shore.
It was built in 1838, expanded in the late 1850s, and during Reconstruction, federal troops quartered in the house, using the basement as a stable for their horses. Today, Tallahassee's historic Murphy House is changing the face of Park Avenue once again, as home of a variety of small shops.
It's a group of small business people that looking for a different way of making a living, I suppose.
Morning Glory Collective is a business of 7 women who decided to go into business together because we were tired of the things that we felt we had to deal with in the traditional business world. We all have been professional business women in the past and wanted an environment in which we could bring our children and have a holistic experience in working.
I make custom clothing. I have a variety of customers. Some of them are hard to fit and can't buy clothes off the rack. Some people just want something different. They either have an idea in their head and can't find exactly what they want, or they want special fabrics that they've either brought from overseas or they can order them through me. And people who want a good quality product that's made to fit them.
Jewelry, custom jewelry. That's all my business is. My business is designing and producing pieces that people have in their mind that they want.
How did you end up in the Murphy House?
It was convenient. I like downtown. It was just starting, putting in new shops. And there was space, and I took it.
George and I have our real estate office here. He's the broker and I'm the environmental associate. And we came, Dennis fixed these beautiful 2 rooms that go all the way, that were Dr. Betton's office for us. And since then, I've been helpful, I think, to Dennis in interesting people in coming here, and have been willing to move out of our space at this point because we so needed a florist with the potted plants and the things that would carry on the tradition of the flowers. And in a storage room, Maureen Pennis has a studio.
Put your head over there. Now just swing it with your whole torso. Right. Just like that. Okay. Let's go.
Morning Glories first came into the dining room and just had it for their meeting space, and then they worked into finding space. The calligrapher who's in the old breakfast room, and this whole ground floor will now be here. Bar Harrison in this, the Big Fish used to be here, the wonderful advertising firm, and then Boss at Clifton, that cottage, and so I had rented it as a guest house, but Bar really needed it for his law office, and so now that's filled up. And at this point, Dennis is working on the attic as soon as he finishes the west wing, the beautiful old west wing with the wine cellar and the Italian tile and the dining room and the big fireplace for cooking. And we'll move our office into that area. So what's happened is that people have been willing to move around, and Dennis does the marvelous work with some help from Terrence, but Terrence's main work is antiques. But his grandmother certainly taught him, and he's very adept anyway, but he's done this beautiful restoration, and it's just almost quiet and you don't even know what's happening, and suddenly there's another beautiful space that's been redone.
In 1925, my grandparents moved to Tallahassee and lived here up until about 1962. As a child, I spent some time here in the late 50s and early 60s. And from 1962 up till 1979, the house was leased out to a law firm in Tallahassee. And in 1979, I came back into the picture and began some minor restorations and some repairs. And started the house with a small antique shop. My grandmother had stored many items in the ground floor rooms of the house when she moved in 1962 to a home on College Avenue. So I began stocking the house with a lot of those furnishings that I repaired and restored. And so a good portion of them did come from the house, but we primarily buy from estates and attend auctions to replenish our stocks.
The camaraderie, in a way, of having other people in their own businesses, that's a lot of support in a way. I like being part of the downtown renovation area. Having the other businesses here, though, I think that gives me a lot of encouragement. They're all doing sort of a different type of store, something you wouldn't find in a mall. And it's encouraging to have other people go through it with me here.
So what's new? It's like a family atmosphere. It's not the push of high business, though we're each in business and for business, but it's a gentler type of business. I mean, we do this to make a living, certainly, but we have a good time with it.
I think it has a great future. I think that it may take quite some time for it to progress enough that there may be some people who can't hang on and wait that long because we all have to make a living. But I think the concept has its time and that it's good and it will happen.
That's Southern Circuit for this week. Thanks for being with us. Next week, Southern Circuit sets sail at Shell Point to learn how a love story turned into a labor of love for Shirley and Larry Traynor. Be with us then. Good night.